I probably shouldn't have said it out loud. That's the truth. Most people don't tell their boss they have a date, especially when their boss is Stella Ryan, the most intimidating executive in the entire building. But I did, and the moment the words left my mouth, everything changed. I still remember the silence that followed, not the comfortable kind, the heavy kind, the kind that makes you wonder if you just destroyed your career. It was 6:50 p.m. in the executive suite on the top floor of a Chicago high-rise. Most of the office was already empty. The lights were dim. The city outside the windows looked like a grid of gold and silver. Stella sat behind her massive oak desk, sleeves rolled slightly, exhaustion hiding behind perfect professionalism. I stood in the doorway. Gray t-shirt, dust from the server rack still on my jeans. Wrong floor, wrong world. I had come upstairs to stop a data breach. Someone inside the company was stealing files from her computer, but explaining that would take time, and time was exactly what I didn't have. Right now, I said calmly. You need to stop typing and step away from the terminal. Her eyebrow lifted slowly. Most executives hate being interrupted. Stella didn't yell. She studied me, like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Then I checked my watch and said something that turned out to be a mistake. I have to leave soon, I added. I have a date. The room went still. She leaned forward in her chair, her fingers steepled under her chin, and then she smiled. Not the corporate smile she used in meetings. Something softer, something curious. I told my boss I have a date, she repeated slowly. Then she tilted her head, her eyes locked on mine, and she asked the one question I wasn't prepared for. Is she prettier than I am? The city outside seemed to disappear. My brain stalled. Not because of the question, but because for the first time since I'd started this contract, I realized Stella Ryan wasn't just the most powerful woman in the building. She was also the loneliest, and suddenly the data breach on her computer wasn't the only problem in that room. Because the way she was looking at me right then, it didn't feel like a joke, it felt like a challenge. And I had no idea what the right answer was. I should have laughed. That would have been the safe response. A quick joke, a polite compliment, something harmless that would keep the moment professional. But I didn't. Instead, I held her gaze, completely still. That seemed to surprise her more than the answer would have. Stella Ryan was used to people reacting, flirting, stumbling over words, trying to impress her. I did none of those things. The silence stretched between us. Her smile lingered, but something behind it shifted, a small flicker of uncertainty. Her knee bounced once under the desk. Then she caught herself and stopped. That tiny detail told me more than anything else. She wasn't teasing. She was testing. You didn't answer the question, she said quietly. Her voice had softened, not playful anymore. Careful. I stepped fully into the office for the first time. The carpet swallowed the sound of my boots. Step away from the terminal first, I said calmly. Then I'll answer. Her eyebrow lifted again. You negotiate like a lawyer, William. Security contractor, I corrected. Another pause. Then she sighed and pushed her chair back. Fine. She stood, smooth, controlled, but I could see the fatigue in the way. Her shoulders rolled once as she stepped aside. I moved to the desk. Her chair was still warm when I leaned over the keyboard. The breach was active. Every second mattered. My fingers moved quickly across the keys, opening hidden system directories. Behind me, Stella spoke again. You know, she said, most men would have answered immediately. I'm not most men. That made her laugh. A quiet one. Tired. You noticed that too, huh? For a moment, the room felt strangely calm. Just the clicking of keys, the soft hum of the building. Then she stepped closer, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel her presence over my shoulder. What exactly is happening to my computer? She asked. Someone inside the company is stealing your files. Her breathing changed instantly. Who? I didn't answer right away. I ran the command. The system log opened. There it was, the access credential. I leaned back slightly and turned the screen toward her. Giovanni Myers, I said. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Stella didn't react immediately. No anger, no panic, just stillness. Then she whispered something that told me everything about the pressure she was under. If he gets those files before tomorrow morning. She stopped. Her voice almost broke. My career is over. I looked at her then. The brilliant executive, the sharp strategist, the woman everyone in the company feared, standing there like someone waiting for bad news from a doctor. And in that moment I realized something unexpected. I didn't just want to fix the breach. I wanted to protect her. But the real problem wasn't the hacker. It was the fact that now we were locked in this office together for hours. And the way Stella was looking at me made it very clear that the question she asked earlier still didn't have an answer. I can't leave? Stella's voice was quiet, but the tension inside it was unmistakable. I kept my eyes on the screen. Not if you want your files intact. Her heels clicked once against the floor as she shifted her weight. For how long? 3 hours, maybe 4. That earned me a slow exhale. The kind people make when they realize the night they planned is no longer happening. She walked to the window, looking down at the glowing Chicago skyline. Guess your date is canceled, she said lightly. I typed another command. It wasn't real. She turned. What? The date, I said calmly. It was an excuse. That made her blink. An excuse for what? To get you away from the keyboard. For a second she just stared at me. Then she laughed. Not the polished executive laugh. A real one. William, you lied to your boss. It was strategically necessary. She walked closer again, folding her arms. And here I was wondering who she was. There was no she. Her gaze stayed on me a moment longer than necessary. Something in the room shifted. Not dramatic, just warmer. Then she cleared her throat and stepped back toward the sofa. Fine, she said. Looks like we're co-workers for the night. I nodded slightly and returned to the keyboard. The next 2 hours passed in strange, focused silence. Lines of code streamed across the screen. Encryption keys rebuilt. Security layers restored. Behind me, Stella worked on her presentation for tomorrow's board meeting. Every so often I heard her sigh, or the quiet rustle of papers. At 9:30 I finally leaned back in the chair. My neck cracked. You stopped typing, she said from the sofa. Running a brute force hash check. How long? 12 minutes. She closed her laptop slowly. The room felt different now. Less like an office. More like 2 people stuck in the same quiet space. I'm ordering food, she announced. I didn't argue. 20 minutes later, we were sitting at the small conference table in the corner. 2 plastic containers, 2 forks, a billionaire company's executive suite, reduced to takeout and exhaustion. She watched me open the containers. You remembered what I order, she said softly. I slid the pad thai toward her. You always choose the peanut sauce in the cafeteria. Her eyes widened slightly. You noticed that? I noticed patterns. For a moment she just looked at me. Something vulnerable crossed her face. You're very calm, she said quietly, even with everything happening. I shrugged. Panic doesn't solve systems. She studied me for a long moment. Then she asked a question so quietly I almost missed it. And people? I met her gaze across the table. People are harder. Her lips curved into a small smile, but there was doubt behind it. Then why help me like this? She asked. I didn't answer right away, because the truth had just occurred to me, and it was inconvenient, dangerous, and probably a mistake. Because, I said finally, someone is trying to destroy you. I paused, and I don't want them to succeed. The silence that followed was different from before. Heavier, warmer, more dangerous, and the way Stella was looking at me now made me realize something I hadn't expected. This night wasn't just fixing her computer. It was changing something between us. Stella didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, not like a boss studying an employee, like a woman trying to understand a man she hadn't noticed before. The silence stretched across the small conference table. 2 open takeout boxes between us, Chicago glowing outside the glass walls. Finally she spoke. You barely know me. Her voice was soft. I twirled the plastic fork once between my fingers. I know enough. Her eyebrow lifted slightly. Such as? I didn't rush the answer. Your department outperforms every other division in the company. She blinked. You studied my numbers? I audit networks, I said. Not people. Then I added quietly. But patterns appear everywhere. She leaned back in the chair, studying me again. And the pattern you see is that someone powerful wants you gone. Her gaze dropped to the table. For the first time since I'd met her, Stella Ryan looked tired. Not physically, emotionally. Giovanni's been trying for months, she admitted quietly. He thinks the board will promote him if I fail. He's wrong. She looked up quickly. You sound very confident. I am. Why? I pushed the empty container aside. Because I just destroyed the only weapon he had. Her shoulders relaxed a fraction. It was small, but I noticed. She noticed that I noticed. And suddenly the room felt strangely intimate. Too quiet. Too aware. She cleared her throat and stood up. I need coffee, she said. Machine's in the hallway. I know. She walked toward the door, then stopped halfway. Turned back. You want some? No. She tilted her head. You don't drink coffee? It's inefficient. That made her laugh again. William Santos, she said slowly. You might be the strangest man I've ever met. I hear that often. She left the office. For a moment the room was completely silent. I leaned back in the chair and rubbed the back of my neck. Something was wrong, not with the network, with me. I wasn't supposed to care this much about a client. Professional distance existed for a reason. People complicated systems. Emotions broke logic. And Stella Ryan was very complicated. When she returned, she carried 2 coffees. She placed one beside me. I thought you said no. I changed my mind. She sat down again across from me, steam rising between us. You know, she said thoughtfully, most men in this building are terrified of me. I noticed. And you're not. I met her eyes. No. She waited, like she expected an explanation, but the truth slipped out before I could stop it. You're not the scary one. Her brows furrowed slightly. Then who is? I took a slow sip of coffee. Whoever made you believe you had to be. The words landed quietly, but the effect on her was immediate. Her expression changed. The confident executive mask cracked, just a little. And for the first time that night, Stella Ryan looked away from me. Like I had just seen something she wasn't ready to show. Stella didn't speak for several seconds. She stared into her coffee like it might give her a safer answer than I had. When she finally looked back at me, the sharp executive confidence had returned, but not completely. A trace of something softer remained. You analyze people the same way you analyze code, don't you? She said. I didn't deny it. Systems reveal themselves if you watch long enough. And what does my system reveal? She asked. Her tone was light, but the question wasn't. I leaned back in the chair slightly. You don't trust easily. She gave a quiet laugh. That's not exactly groundbreaking insight. You also carry the entire company on your shoulders. That made her pause. You notice that too? It's obvious. Her fingers tightened around the coffee cup. And what else? I hesitated, because the next observation wasn't professional. It was personal. You're tired, I said. The room went still. Not the awkward kind of stillness. The honest kind. Stella exhaled slowly. Yeah, she admitted quietly, I am. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. Every day feels like a war here. With Giovanni? With everyone. Her voice had dropped almost to a whisper. The board wants results. The CEO wants loyalty. The investors want growth. And the moment I slow down, she stopped. They replace you, I finished. She nodded once. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she asked something unexpected. Why aren't you in a job like this? I frowned slightly. What do you mean? You're brilliant, she said simply. You could run an entire tech division somewhere. Instead, you sit alone in server rooms. I shrugged. Less politics. That's it? Yes. She studied me again. Longer this time. You hide too, she said quietly. That caught me off guard. I don't hide. You do, she said calmly. Behind logic, behind quiet, behind that calm expression you wear like armor. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped, because she wasn't wrong. That seemed to amuse her. See, she said softly. People are harder than systems. I looked at her across the table. Something warm passed between us. Not loud, not dramatic, just recognition. Then her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen. The softness vanished instantly. Her jaw tightened. What is it? I asked. She turned the phone so I could see the message. It was from Giovanni Myers. Just one sentence. Hope your evening is going well, Stella. Looking forward to tomorrow's board meeting. I felt the tension return to the room. Stella locked the phone and placed it face down. He thinks he's already won, she said quietly. I stood up and walked back toward the terminal. No, I replied calmly. He just doesn't know yet that he's already lost. Behind me, Stella watched in silence, and when I glanced back at her for a second, the way she was looking at me had changed. There was relief there, but something else too, something far more dangerous. Trust. Trust is a dangerous thing, especially in a building like this. I could feel it in the way Stella watched me as I returned to the terminal. Not the guarded executive look she gave everyone else. Something quieter. Something real. You're very certain about tomorrow, she said after a moment. I typed another command, watching the encryption rebuild. I am. You don't seem worried at all. I already solved the problem. She leaned against the desk beside me, folding her arms. That's not what I meant. I stopped typing. What did you mean? Her voice softened slightly. You're risking your contract. That made me look up. If Giovanni finds out you interfered directly, she continued, he'll try to bury you with legal complaints. Maybe. You say that like you don't care. I don't. That made her frown. Why? I thought about the answer for a second, then gave her the honest one. Because some things are worth the trouble. Her eyes searched my face. And I'm one of those things? The question hung between us. Careful. Dangerous. I turned back to the screen before answering. You're the client. She didn't move. Just the client? Yes. That answer should have ended the conversation, but it didn't, because neither of us believed it. She stepped away from the desk slowly and walked back to the sofa. The room fell quiet again, but the silence had changed. The air felt heavier. Around 11:30, she stretched out on the couch, exhaustion finally catching up with her. You ever sleep, William? She asked. When the work is done. That sounds lonely. It's efficient. She smiled faintly at that. Then she pulled her jacket over her shoulders and lay down. Wake me when you're finished, she murmured. Within minutes, her breathing slowed. The executive mask was gone again. No sharp posture. No steel in her voice. Just a woman who had been fighting too many battles for too long. I should have ignored it, stayed focused, finished the job. But my eyes drifted toward the couch anyway. Her hair had fallen loose across the pillow. One hand curled near her face. Peaceful. For the first time since I met her. A strange pull settled in my chest. Not dramatic, just quiet gravity. I forced my attention back to the terminal. Lines of code filled the screen. Encryption rebuilt. Security layers sealed. This was the best way to protect her. Not by watching her sleep, but by making sure no one could ever use her files against her again. At exactly 2 a.m., the final progress. Bar hit 100%. The system locked. Secure. I leaned back slowly. 3 hours of tension released at once. The crisis was over. But when I looked toward the couch again, Stella was awake, watching me, and the expression on her face told me something I hadn't prepared for. She had been watching me for a while. You finished. Her voice was soft, still thick with sleep. I nodded once. It's done. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the servers behind the walls. Stella pushed herself up slowly on the sofa, brushing her hair back from her face. Without the perfect posture and sharp confidence she wore during the day, she looked different, more human, more real. She watched me for a long moment. You didn't wake me, she said. You needed sleep. That wasn't your job. No, I agreed. It wasn't. She stood and walked toward the desk. Her steps were slower now, the exhaustion still lingering. You stayed up the entire night, she said. That was the plan. She leaned against the desk beside me, crossing her arms. You could have left hours ago. Not without finishing. Her eyes narrowed slightly. That's not what I meant. I turned to face her. What did you mean? For a second she looked unsure, like she was debating how honest to be. Then she said it anyway. You could have left me to deal with this tomorrow. I shook my head. That would have been inefficient. She laughed softly. You hide behind that word a lot. Efficient? Yes. Her gaze held mine. But that's not why you stayed. I didn't answer, because the truth had been bothering me for the last hour. She stepped closer, not touching me, but close enough that I could see the faint, tired lines at the corners of her eyes. You stayed because you didn't want him to hurt me, she said quietly. The statement wasn't dramatic. It was simple, matter-of-fact, and uncomfortably accurate. I stayed because it was the correct solution, I said. She studied me like she was reading a page that refused to stay still. Then she sighed. You know something, William? What? You're terrible at lying. That almost made me smile. Almost. She looked around the office slowly. The empty takeout boxes, the dim lights, the quiet aftermath of the long night. Strange, she murmured. What is? This. She gestured to the room. We just stopped a corporate sabotage attempt. And somehow it feels like the calmest night I've had in months. That's because the problem is solved. Her eyes shifted back to me. No, she said gently. That's not the reason. Before I could ask what she meant, the clock on the wall ticked over to 3 a.m. She noticed it too. 3 hours until the board meeting, she said. Yes, and you're going to be there. I have to present the security report. Her lips curved slightly. Good. Why? She held my gaze. Because when Giovanni realizes his plan failed, I want you in the room. Something in her tone made my chest tighten slightly. Not fear, anticipation. Then she added quietly, and not just for the report. I frowned slightly. What else? Stella's smile grew a little more mysterious. You'll see tomorrow. And suddenly I had the strange feeling that the board meeting wasn't going to go the way anyone expected. Morning came faster than either of us expected. At 8:25 a.m., the executive boardroom felt like a pressure chamber. Long mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows, 12 board members in tailored suits pretending not to enjoy the tension in the room. I sat quietly in the back row. Gray shirt, contractor badge, invisible, exactly where someone like me belonged. At the front of the room, Stella Ryan stood beside the projection screen. Perfect posture. Sharp black suit. No sign she had slept on a couch 3 hours earlier. If I hadn't been there, I wouldn't have believed it either. Across the table sat Giovanni Myers. Confident. Too confident. That was the first sign his plan had already failed. Stella began the meeting calmly, walking the board through the quarterly numbers with surgical precision, revenue projections, department efficiency. Then she reached the final slide. Which brings me to the restructuring proposal, she said. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. Everyone knew what that meant. Giovanni leaned back in his chair, smiling faintly. Here it comes. He raised his hand slowly. If I may, he interrupted. Stella nodded politely. Of course. He opened a folder and slid a flash drive onto the table. I believe the board deserves to see something before we approve these cuts. A murmur moved through the room. Stella didn't react, not even slightly. Giovanni continued. Late last night, I received an anonymous data dump from Stella. Ryan's personal files. He tapped the flash drive. Draft documents suggesting her recommendations may be biased. The room turned cold. Eyes shifted toward Stella. Waiting, judging. Giovanni's smile widened. I think transparency is important, he added smoothly. Perhaps it can decrypt these files for the board. Stella didn't argue. She didn't panic. Instead, she did something very simple. She looked to the back of the room, directly at me. Actually, she said calmly, I believe William Santos should handle that. Every head in the room turned. I stood up slowly. The room fell silent as I walked toward the table. Giovanni watched me with thinly disguised confidence. He thought the drive contained evidence. He thought Stella was finished. I plugged the flash drive into the presentation laptop. The screen lit up. A folder appeared. I opened the first file. The projector filled with chaos. Random characters. Broken data. Corrupted fragments. I opened the second file. Same thing. More corrupted fragments. The room began to whisper. I ran a quick diagnostic script. Numbers filled the screen. Then I spoke. This data is unreadable, I said calmly. Giovanni's smile vanished instantly. That's impossible. I looked at the screen again. No, I replied, it's not. I turned slowly toward the board. The files were scraped from an internal node using unauthorized credentials. Then I paused. And that node belongs to Giovanni Myers. The silence that followed was lethal. Giovanni's face turned pale. That's ridiculous. Stella stepped forward before he could finish. You attempted corporate espionage, she said calmly. And you failed. The boardroom exploded with shocked voices. But Stella didn't look at them. She looked at me, and in that quiet moment across the room, her expression said something no one else there noticed. We did it. The room didn't explode immediately. First came the silence, the heavy kind, the kind that makes powerful people realize something just went very wrong. Giovanni looked around the table like the floor had disappeared beneath him. That's ridiculous, he said quickly. Someone tampered with that drive. I didn't move from the laptop. No one tampered with it. The CEO leaned forward slowly. Explain. I turned the screen slightly so the board could see the diagnostic log. These files are corrupted hash fragments, I said calmly. They were captured during an unauthorized packet-sniffing attempt on Stella Ryan's workstation. A murmur spread through the room. Giovanni's confidence was gone now. What you're seeing, I continued, is the result of a failed data theft. The CEO's eyes shifted to him. Failed data theft? Yes. I paused, then delivered the final detail. The internal network credentials used for the breach belonged to Giovanni Myers. Giovanni stood up so quickly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. This is absurd. But the board wasn't looking at me anymore. They were looking at him. The CEO's voice turned cold. Sit down, Giovanni. He didn't. Instead, he turned toward Stella. You set me up. Her expression remained perfectly calm. No, she said quietly. You set yourself up. She reached into her portfolio and placed a stack of printed documents on the table. Firewall logs, timestamp reports, digital signatures, evidence, clean, precise, unavoidable. You attempted to access confidential files from my machine last night. She continued. William documented the breach and secured the network. The CEO stood up slowly. His patience was gone. My office, he said to Giovanni. Now. 2 words. A career-ending sentence. Giovanni looked around the room one last time. No allies, no sympathy, just cold silence. He grabbed his folder and walked out. The door closed behind him with a heavy click. No one spoke for several seconds. Then the CEO looked back at Stella. "Continue your presentation." Just like that. The meeting moved on. Numbers, budgets, votes. By the end of the hour, the board approved Stella's restructuring plan unanimously. Promotion confirmed. Crisis over. When the meeting finally ended, executives gathered around Stella offering congratulations. I didn't stay. I slipped out quietly through the back door, invisible again. Exactly how I preferred it. But as I stepped into the hallway, I felt something unexpected, a strange pull in my chest, because for the first time in a long time, leaving didn't feel easy, and a part of me had the uncomfortable feeling that the most complicated part of this entire situation had nothing to do with corporate sabotage. It had to do with Stella Ryan and the way she had looked at me across that boardroom table. By 6 p.m., I was back in the server room. My duffel bag sat open on the metal table beside me, laptop packed, tools packed, access badge about to expire. The contract was finished, network secured, problem solved. That was usually the part where I disappeared. No goodbyes, no celebrations, just the quiet satisfaction of a system restored. I zipped the bag. The sound echoed softly through the cold room. "Are you leaving already?" Her voice came from the doorway. I turned. Stella Ryan stood there, leaning lightly against the frame, but she didn't look like the same woman from the boardroom. The sharp heels were gone, replaced by simple flats. Her posture wasn't rigid. It was relaxed, human. "Yes," I said. "Contract's complete." She stepped inside slowly, looking around the rows of blinking servers. "So this is where you've been hiding." "I wasn't hiding." She smiled faintly. "You say that a lot." She stopped a few feet away from me. The quiet between us felt different now. No tension, no pressure, just awareness. "You missed the celebration lunch," she said. "Not my environment." I noticed. She studied me for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket. "I need you to fix one more thing." I frowned slightly. "What's broken?" Instead of answering, she held something out toward me. A guest access card from building security. "Valid for 24 hours. "My calendar," she said quietly. "It's a mess." I looked at the card. "You want technical support?" Her lips curved slightly. "No." She took one step closer. "I have a dinner reservation tonight at 8. She held my gaze steadily. "And no one to go with." The room went completely still. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't flirting. This was a choice. Public. Clear. I studied her face for hesitation. There was none, just calm certainty. Finally, I reached out and took the card. Our fingers brushed for a brief second. Warm, real. "I can fix a calendar," I said quietly. Her expression softened. She stepped closer again, close enough that I could hear her breathing. "William," she whispered. I placed one hand gently at her waist. No rush, no hesitation, just certainty. When I leaned down and kissed her, it wasn't desperate or dramatic. It felt like something finally clicking into place, like a lock turning, like a door closing on a long storm. When we parted, her shoulders relaxed in a way I had never seen before. 8 o'clock, she murmured. "I'll be there." She smiled, and for the first time since I met her, Stella Ryan looked completely at peace. As she walked toward the elevator, I slipped the guest card into my pocket. The server room suddenly felt quieter, but not empty, because sometimes the most stable system in the world is simply two people choosing to stay. And that night, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't planning to leave.